What's up, lockers? Welcome to another episode of The Movie Shelf. That's where I take a movie off of this very shelf, watch it, rate it between 1 and 100, and then put it up against all the other films that I've watched from the shelf or from your suggestions. That's right, you can suggest a film and I'll watch it even if it's not on my shelf, and it will then be listed on the master list. The top 10 can always be found at the end of every episode. Oh, what's this? Oh, this is the new Lock 22 mug, available in small quantities right now. Will be available on a mass scale at some point. But if you want one, hit me up. We'll get it for you. All right. That said, we are doing this one's for Warren Richards. Talked about it a while ago, and it's been sitting there. I've been trying to make notes on it, and you'll see why once we get into it. But we are going to talk about 2010's Shutter Island, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. So this was directed by Martin Scorsese, based on Dennis Lehane's novel from 2003 with the same title, Shutter Island. Had a budget of $80 million. That's a huge budget. But I mean, when you have DiCaprio, a large portion of your budget is going to pay him. The return on this film was under 300 million in the United States, but 294.8 million is still a really good number, especially considering the money involved in the investment. This film is a psychological thriller, I want to say, for sure. It's the mind games begin from the time you decide what movie you're going to watch. I don't know if you guys have tried to do this, but if you take the letters from Shutter Island, and you can look at them here, you can actually spell out truths and lies or truths denial. So it's an anagram. Shutter Island, which is what makes it a perfect title. Again, look at it. Truths and lies or truths denial. Kind of creepy. I mean, there's other things that I could spell, but not using all the letters. But those are the two that I found to be quite interesting on this film. So let the mind games begin. We have a movie that takes place in 1954. Why is that significant? Because it does hold a few, while it's a fictional piece, it does hold a few actual historical instances. The first being they're there in the middle of a hurricane on this island in New England. That would have been Hurricane Carol, which was one of three major hurricanes in 1954 to hit the coast up there in New England during the Atlantic tropical cyclone season. So cast, I already said Leonardo DiCaprio. He plays Teddy Daniels or Andrew Laeddis. Well, let's unpack that at some point. Mark Ruffalo plays Chuck All. He actually won the role by sending a fan letter to Martin Scorsese saying they would love to work with him. And then he got this role. And I have a lot to say about Mark Ruffalo in this film. Michelle Williams, she's always brilliant. Emily Mortimer plays Rachel. Patricia Clarkson plays the other Rachel. The mind games continue. Academy Award winner Ben Kingsley plays Dr. Colley. Max von Sydow's in here. You've got John Carroll Lynch. There's just a great cast of familiar faces doing what they do best. This movie is very Freudian to me. I've watched it 4 times in the last 2 weeks. So it's about mental health and lack thereof, so to speak. You've had plenty of time to see it. It came out in 2010. So this episode may be more spoiler heavy than in some of my other episodes, but really the whole thing is predicated on one of the last things uttered by your lead character, DiCaprio, who plays, like I said, Teddy Daniels or Andrew Laeddis, depending on what you choose to think. And I can't for the life of me find a way to discuss this film without talking about that final line. So back to what I was going to say about the Freudian stuff. I'm not a studier of Freud. I know his basic principles. I know that he is very well followed in the psychiatric community, even to this day. And one of his philosophies was subconsciousness is as confusing as cloudy weather, in opposition to clear skies being consciousness. That's one of his basic principles. So in watching this film, I noticed that it's really cloudy and rainy through most of the film, especially towards the beginning and then through the storm. And then it starts to lighten up and it's finally sunny at the end. I try to figure out things like these during films. I try and look for like certain things to tell me how I'm supposed to feel about things. It's one of my favorite things about watching films. I mentioned this in the Shawshank Redemption episode. It was all about hope. The harmonica symbolized hope, and then when he finally got the hope, you hear just two notes of harmonica. That makes the movie for me. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily always, and I'm not saying I'm above anybody, I'm saying a lot of people that just goes past them, like it's not part of the consumption of the film. So if you really sit down and break these things down, it really becomes obvious. Now, there's a lot of things in here that are foreshadowed that I can't possibly begin to guess. So there's a lot of continuity things in here. It's basically about, I'm just going to give you the gist of it. A guy shows up to investigate a disappearance, and from the outset, he's treated as though he's a real detective. And over the course of time, you start to question whether he is actually the patient and everybody else is going along with it. Sorry to spoil that like that, but I mean, really, we have to get to that to even discuss the rest of the film. And I will say this, I noticed, if you guys ever wonder who's in on it during the film, all you have to do is watch the guards, all right? The guards always stand behind DiCaprio's character and patients, real patients. If the person that's talking or speaking is not a real patient, the guards couldn't care less about them. So that kind of, just knowing that, like, I mean, I feel like I've discovered that, but when you know that, you're like, okay, I know who's who now. And there's a lot of things that give this away. I'm not going to tell you every single one that I discovered, because this episode would be forever long. Let's start with Mark Ruffalo. All right. He gets there and he's supposed to be DiCaprio's partner from the police department, the detective's office. And I remember the first time I watched this film, I said to myself, first of all, Mark Ruffalo is one of the greatest actors in the known universe. I love him. And I'm watching this film the first time in the theater, and I'm like, dude, Mark Ruffalo is absolutely bonking this role. It's terrible. I've never seen him act this poorly. And I was really frustrated by that. Well, as the film progresses, you realize he's not an actor. All right. He's actually a doctor at this medical facility pretending to be an actor, acting as he's a police detective. And if you look at it that way, his performance is fucking brilliant. Again, A plus 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 for Mark Ruffalo for knowing, and I don't know if he was instructed to do this. I'm sure he probably was, but they're like, dude, you can't be the normal awesome actor that you are. You kind of have to bone this in order to make it believable, not to latest, but to the audience watching. Because if you nail this like you normally do, they're gonna be like, nah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you can get around that, and then once you realize that he's blowing it on purpose as an actor, acting as a guy who's not an actor, pretending to be an actor, fucking brilliant. Mark Ruffalo rules, okay? And he acts everybody under the table in this film, even though It's not a, I mean, by all standards, if it was a true performance of an actor, it would not be great. But based on what I said, you realize that he was just phenomenal. DiCaprio's DiCaprio. He's great. Um, Michelle Williams, don't want to mention too much about her character. But she's she's there's just something about her. To see her on film, you always know that you're going to get delivered A+ performance. Same with Max von Sydow, same with Ben Kingsley. I mean, and I would expect that from a big budget Martin Scorsese film. So this is a partnership between Scorsese and DiCaprio, one of the few that did not garner any Oscar nominations. That blows my mind. Best original screenplay should have, I mean, nominated? Why not nominated? I mean, come on. The screenplay is intelligent, it's thought-provoking, it's all of the things you want in a psychological thriller. How it did not obtain even a nomination is crazy to me. But you have Gangs of New York, 2002, Aviator, 2004, The Departed, 2006, Wolf of Wall Street, 2013. Interestingly enough, they were supposed to be filming instead of this film, The Wolf of Wall Street, but they couldn't get the funding, so they moved on with this instead. One of the things I noticed right away, and this kicked my ass, this is a callback to one of the previous films that I reviewed. The first film I reviewed, actually, The Shining. If you listen at the very beginning of the film, the opening Paramount logo and the credits that follow, you'll notice it's a sample taken from The Shining. Jack's always got my back. But that's awesome, because to me that's saying, all right, my name is Martin Scorsese. I'm one of the best directors in the known universe, and I'm going to do something calling back to who I believe is one of the greatest directors in the known universe, and that was Stanley Kubrick. And it has to be a nod to him specifically. So, awesome. I'm in. I love this movie. I'm ready to go. So there's two things of significance that I saw with DiCaprio's character in particular, as he's pretending to be, well, as he's playing the detective. And that is his aversion to water and matches. You'll notice that he doesn't light his own cigarette until very late in the film, when things start turning, the tides start turning. And every time water is mentioned, it likens back to his wife drowning their children and then him killing her, et cetera, et cetera. And these things start to merge. So to me, as a non-Freudian guy, but understander of the principles that I told you at the very beginning of this, like, the treatment is starting to work. Like, later on, he's able to light his own cigarettes, and which is, I mean, if you were a doctor observing this, you'd be like, okay, our experiment's working, let's keep going. The medication that he takes is also one of the things that is historically, I don't know if it's historically like completely accurate, but I would think it's chlorpromazine, which is the brand name for Thorazine. And that was a psychiatric medication that was developed, first used in bipolar disorders and schizophrenia, like in 1953. So this would have been the year before this film took place. And that's actually significant in history, because the development, that's the beginning of basically any type of antidepressant medication that people take these days. Before that, it was like the completely barbaric prefrontal lobotomy was the solution to these problems. And now they have a medication to help people, maintain their sanity so that they can do everyday life. But I want to go, before I give my final thoughts and my review, or my final score, I would like to talk about the thing that DiCaprio's character, Teddy Daniels, or Andrew Laeddis, as we now know, um, he says it at the final. So he's been captured. He's been established as Andrew Laeddis from the final scenes in the lighthouse top, and that whole scene is just chilling because they're telling him the truth, but you don't know that. You don't know that he's being told the truth. You're like, I don't know whose side I'm on at this point. But then this is one thing that leaves people wondering at the end of the film. And you may still wonder, you may think I'm full of shit, but he says to Mark Ruffalo, he says, "This place makes me wonder which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man." So let's break that down. That's not something that an insane person says. The character did choose his own fate, and he chose the fate of Laeddis. And why would he do that? Well, he chose the fate of Laeddis because this basically is, how do you say it? Is this basically would be a assisted suicide. All right. And he says it to him like, "Hey, buddy, I've accepted this. For all intents and purposes, your treatment has worked. I understand that I have problems, but the problems here are too much for me to bear now, knowing that I drove my wife insane to kill our children, and then I killed her. And he doesn't want to face these delusions that he's having anymore." Um, it's it's really a tough pill to swallow. Pardon my weird pun about medication, but it really is a tough pill to swallow, to realize that you watch this entire charade play out, hoping that he was the sane one. But Hollywood has its way, and well, it's following a book that's written. Actually, that line that he says is not in the book. So this is an interesting Kubrick-esque add to the film that kind of makes the film. It really does. It totally turns this review on its ear. So I want to know what you guys think. Super excited that was able to finally put this review together. Shutter Island, 2010, brilliant film. Now let's find out where it goes on the all-time list. All right. So unfortunately for this film, we've done a lot of films that are like my favorites ever, ever, ever. And just talking about this, I may feel like I underscored this film just a little bit, but I looked at all the other films on the list, and I got to figure out where it goes as far as like in between what. This didn't make the top 10. It's currently at number 11 with a score of 82.2. 82.2 is the score for this film, which puts it, like I said, at number 11. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like or dislike. Look, I got both options for you. Like, any engagement with the channel helps. It totally helps. I'm telling you, the algorithms are set to where engagement is the best way to get more views. So if you comment on this, if you even just like it, dislike it, if you share it, that's even better. I would love you guys for any of that. But thank you so much again for the support. Until next time, thanks for watching The Movie Shelf.